You're watching or listening to Strangers in Space, and for the next half an hour, I'm going to be opening this parcel, so you don't have to. Hi, I'm JR.
I'm Ian.
And I'm Ian.
I'm John.
And I'm Ian.
No, you're not. You're Matt. Right. I've been saving this. Oh, damn it. Now the thing's gone wrong. Right. Anybody who's watching this is going to be fascinating. Anybody who's just listening, this is just going to be...
This is the worst unboxing.
Yes.
Is this something you've nicked off your range, JR?
Yeah, you're
Yes,
supposed to, JR. If you can't tear open parcels.
Are you just seeing what the Amazon guys just delivered? This has nothing to do with the podcast.
It's a Vibromax 3000.
Oh,
That's quite a good idea.
oh.
So what have I got?
You have got Gods and Monsters sort of issue 1, which is Omega and Sutek. And Sutek episode was written by me with amazing artwork by what's his name? Adrian Salmon. Can't believe I forgot his name. He's amazing. I've been talking to him this morning, actually. But yeah, the amazing Adrian Salmon, who Doctor Who fans, British ones especially, will know from Doctor Who magazine.
There's a DVD. And the DVD,
oh, yeah. Yeah.
So the DVD's got 4 features, one of which is, 6 features, 2 of which are audio. The video features, one of which is an animated trailer of Sutek, one of which is a conversation with Omega writer Mark Griffiths, one of which is conversation with Doctor Who Weekly editor Des Skin, and one of which is conversation with Sutek writer Iain Winterton, also known as Kelly Griffiths.
Kelly Griffiths, my wife. Yeah, but I do believe there's a Pyramid of Mars commentary on there with Philip Hinchcliffe and Gabriel Wolfe, which I am not on, but it was my Zoom account that recorded it.
Oh, wow.
and sat there listening.
That is the only reason I parted with 14 quid of my own money.
Yeah, it's a very good, I love Gabriel anyway. But so I got to direct him on that trailer as well, which people can also see on YouTube without buying the magazine.
But they should buy the... It's not a magazine, it's a comic.
Sorry, comic, yes. Buy the comic. But
right.
Yeah. End of plugging.
That's the advertisement out of the way. I've noticed a lot of podcasts start with an advertisement. That was ours. Let's go round in a circle and find out what we all thought of last night's Doctor Who, this morning's Doctor Who, tonight's Doctor Who, depends when you're watching it. Ian with a Martin, what did you think?
I
tell you what, Ian, I'm going to cut you off right there. You've not been with us for this series of reviews. So give me, just in a very brief flash, what have you been thinking of the series so far?
I've not been enjoying it, but
okay. And what did you think of this one?
I didn't enjoy it.
Excellent. I'm about.
If you want it in a nutshell, I think it's probably great TV for the 8-year-olds, which is the point of it. But it seems the show seems to have skewed a lot younger in the last, since Jodie. I think it went a bit younger, and it's got a bit younger again. And I think it's just not for me anymore. But I imagine it was great TV for lots of people.
Just remind me, everybody else, in our WhatsApp group, Ian insisted on being on this podcast, right? So you could talk about this. You put yourself through it, Ian.
Dedication to
do you want converting, Ian? Is that the Ian Martin? Is that the idea? Are you looking for therapy or?
No, I just want to talk it through with some more intelligent people and see if I'm wrong or what's going on.
I think for the benefit of this podcast, we should call you US Ian, and we should call the other Ian Mancune Ian.
Okay.
Matt, what did you think of the episode?
I really liked it. I thought it was good, considering it was an RTD season finale, which tend to, go off the boil. I thought this one was quite a strong one. I mean, I think it had the weaknesses that RTD finales tend to have. But it had some interesting things in there, and it had Gabriel Wolfe. So,
Fair enough. I didn't think it had any interesting things, and I thought it was the worst RTD finale by quite some distance. John, what did you think?
I think it's the weakest RTD finale too. I think he's trying to do a Hellbent myself.
I don't know what he was trying to do, and I don't know what he thought he was trying to do, but it felt to me like it didn't actually do anything. He just kind of shoved a load of shit in front of a camera and pointed it for 60 minutes.
This is going to be a rough podcast.
Yeah.
I liked it.
Mancune, Iain, what did you think of the episode?
I tell you what, I watched it at the cinema with my 14-year-old last night, which I think it shows how the fact he's not a massive Doctor Who fan. The fact that he was interested enough to want to watch it at the cinema, well, says a lot about it making strides in that demographic.
But I think, before you go on to say what you both thought, that probably says more about the first half, right?
Yeah.
The first half drew people out, didn't it?
As I was about to say,
yeah,
he was disappointed. I was disappointed. But I watched it this morning with my 8-year-old, and it has gone up a notch. This is often the way with episodes of Doctor Who that you go, oh my, because they are the weight of expectation that these people are creating under, and all the things that we will go on to talk about, Ruby's mother and things like that. Once you know where they're going, then you can, a second watch makes you go, I don't mind that as much now. I'm at peace with it, or whatever. And so it would have been a 6 out of 10 for me, and now it's a 7 out of 10 to stick to the end.
Spoilers.
But I hate because I had to do it for a living. I hate assigning numbers anyway. But it did make me go up a notch on a second viewing, is what I will say. As an opener.
On the subject of numbers, I probably agree, but we did it on the first one, and now it gives us somewhere to head. Plus, I think it gives the end of the podcast a bit of a climax that it might not otherwise have.
Yeah.
Matt,
Hello.
as the only positive voice on this podcast, I've got a choice for you. Either a question, which you can answer, or else just an opportunity to leave at this juncture.
I can answer a question. I can try and dig into what you guys all missed from the episode.
Yeah, what did you find that we all know? But you were talking before we started recording about a theory about something. Do you want to bring that up?
What, The Last Jedi thing?
Yeah, because I think it's worth talking about. And I think it's a good point to start the podcast, because it's a valid thing that Russell T Davies is doing that maybe we weren't expecting, that maybe had an impact on our enjoyment of the episode.
So it's the revelation about Ruby's mother and Ruby's nature is a Last Jedi moment where it reveals actually she's not somebody who's special. She's sort of unimportant, but in doing so reveals that normal people are the most important people in the universe. And he does, as John said before we started, apparently in the commentary, he acknowledges that he nicked it from The Last Jedi. But I don't mind that, because I think, it's a really, actually, it's one of the more left-wing things he does. I think this is a left-wing, a proper socialist thing that he and Rian Johnson do, that says it's not about, how much power you accumulate. Your impact on the world comes from your ordinariness and, what you do in your life as a sort of mundane level. And I think that's an important point, up until J.J. Abrams then reverses it by saying, that's nonsense. You've got to be a member of the aristocracy. So I quite liked it in here, and I thought it quite neatly reflected the similar but not identical thing at the climax of Flux, where Jodie Whittaker discovers that the Jodie Whittaker Doctor discovers that it doesn't matter whether she's special or not, or where she comes from. So that kind of revelation, I think he picks up from a little bit from Chibnall. So I welcome that.
I think
and that's exactly what he did with Donna Noble as well.
No, he made Donna Noble.
He did say he didn't like what it was reversed with in Star Wars either. He liked the Last Jedi version, hated what they did in Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, rightly so, I think.
Quite right.
Yeah, I completely agree. But I
Mhm.
think the problem is this is the man who turns Donna into the Dr. Donna version of a god and Rose into the Bad Wolf version of a
Well-
god. And I think it's fine to tell a story about ordinary people, but the fact is he made every other ordinary person dead, and he told a story about how special this ordinary person was without really giving us any evidence of it.
But then
So I
again,
Go on,
with
John.
the Devil's Court, there was, what we used to celebrity historicals with the Russell T Davies era, celebrating the great man of history stuff, or great person of history. You had Shakespeare, you had Agatha Christie, you had
Dickens.
Dickens. But with the Beatles, it decentered them. It was about music, it was about impact. So I think it's a change of approach in this version.
Yeah. Ian, did you have something?
Sorry, which Ian? But yeah, I was about to say, I think one of the themes of this season has been playing with expectation and story, and like with Dot and Bubble, where you kind of go, oh my God, she's going to turn out to be an arsehole. She's not going to be changed for the better by the Doctor, or maybe she is slightly, but we can discuss that. But in this one, all the fans beforehand were going, oh God, she's going to be another Clara. She's going to be an amazing person. And it's exactly like the Rey Skywalker thing. And I think in this, it was a really tricky thing to do as a writer, to go, here's your expectation, and you're, oh, are you all disappointed now I didn't give you what you said you didn't want? And that seems to be the sort of square he's tried to circle. And I think that's why, judging by the internet, it's been really, really quite anti this episode generally.
But the thing
I
is,
generally quite liked it.
but he did do that, but he did it with Susan Twist instead. So it wasn't that was missing from the episode, but it was just so. Actually, in the end, you've got. I mean, at the end of the story, Ruby Sunday's great sort of agency in the episode is she's the one who puts the leash on Sutek.
Yeah.
And that's about it. But you've still got. But I think for me, the trouble was that this episode was all about that Russell T Davies has built up lots of clues in a puzzle, and in this episode he just says, well, actually it wasn't important, and then there's a because, and then there's nothing after the because. So you've got a Susan Twist who has dreams about what all the other Susan Twists have done, but there's no connection between all the variations of Susan Twist. There's no reason why this Susan Twist can see all the things that the other Susan Twists have done. You've got things like why the 73 yards. So he builds up this great big moment about the 73 yards, but in the end it's 73 yards because there's no special reason why it's 73 yards. It just is. And then you've got the thing about, oh, there's this really important thing about the pointing. And then it turns out that you're pointing because, and there's no special reason for the pointing. And I mean, the worst moment in the entire episode is the words Ruby Road appearing on the lamppost when somebody worked out without any information given to work out the solution to this puzzle that the reason this character is pointing at a lamppost is because that's what she wants Ruby's name to be.
Yeah, it reminded me of it reminded me of Moffat a lot. Moffat, not the brilliant Moffat, but Moffat when he was spinning plates and running out and doing too many things at once. It reminded me of the Matt Smith finale when he was basically doing his tick box of things I haven't sorted out yet, and giving them pat answers. It was a bit like that. It also reminded me of the Impossible Astronaut.
But that shouldn't be Russell T Davies's first one back, should it?
No, it shouldn't.
Davies's first one back should be a lot more thoroughgoing than this.
Oh, totally. I'm not excusing it. I'm just saying that's what it reminded me of. This is the downside of it for me. So it reminded me of, I loved the first part, and then the second part, I almost expected to get a Moffat style 6 months later because I don't know how to get out of this.
I didn't mind the pointing at Ruby Road bit because by that point you've revealed that Ruby is just an ordinary person, and what's the most important a crucial thing when you're an ordinary person? It's the name you've been given, and she doesn't know who gave her the name. So that moment, that in soap opera logic, that's a big moment. In Doctor Who fighting, what I disagree with is Russell T Davies saying, you know, Doctor Who isn't about, you know, fighting big gods. It's about, you know, the relationship between the Doctor and the companion. And there's a level of truth to that, but you spend 5 to 10 minutes at the end basically kind of just talking about the companion and how ordinary she is. That's kind of, I want it to be more about fighting gods because that's more exciting.
It's 19 minutes from the end when Sutekh goes into the void.
Yeah.
19 minutes from the end of the episode.
I think I would criticize Russell T Davies, and that's one of the things I said. I think this is what he does before, because this is what he did in the last David Tennant, the first last David Tennant story, where he spends, you know, 10 minutes just sort of drifting around watching David Tennant die. I think, you know, end with a bang, not with a whimper. And I think this one had an emotional bang, so to speak, at the end, but I want a sort of dramatic, you know, Sutekh dies bang rather than an emotional bang, or maybe a balance between them.
I think the best thing about Stephen Moffat was he did tell stories about the people, but he managed to integrate the stories that he was telling about the people with the sci-fi. So the hybrid thing, the hybrid was the people. The Pandorica thing, all that was about the people. It's always about the people with Stephen Moffat, given a sci-fi twist. So he manages to integrate the two things. Russell T Davies, he can't even get the two things to land at the same time, let alone have any connection. It's like the Sutekh story forms the first 26 minutes of this episode, and the Ruby's mother's story forms the last 19. And at no point do either of the two things really impact on each other.
Yeah, they do.
I was going to say that's not strictly true, but that's how it feels when he entirely concentrates on Sutekh. And then 19 minutes from here, actually, it's 19 minutes when they go to the vortex. It's about 14 or something once Sutekh's turned into dust. Why does he turn into dust in the vortex? Isn't that where he's been living for the past 20 years?
He's been living around in the TARDIS, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's been riding on the back of the TARDIS.
Apparently, it's why Russell T Davies wanted the TARDIS to spark in this title sequence, to say that impact anything that touches the void will.
Okay. I mean, I don't care. It apparently killed him.
Yes.
But then he spends the last 15 minutes just doing, so Ruby's an ordinary person, and it just goes on and on and on. I want to bring US Iain back in because he's barely had anything to say. US Iain.
That's not your fault.
Dredge your mind and find me one nice thing you can say about this episode.
Well, I got to say that again, if I was like an 8-year-old kid, then the iconography of Sutekh on top of the TARDIS and wrapped around it must have been amazing and must be so inspiring and just one of the kind of defining moments. That's all I've got to say. Like this thing with the pointing, if you want to name a baby, you put a bit of paper with the baby that says her name is Ruby. You don't leave a baby on her own and point at something like the baby's going to go, oh, I'll make a mental note of that. And in years' time, when I'm old enough to think and speak, I'll remember that I'm called Ruby. It wasn't even for idiots.
Who is she pointing for?
Yeah,
CCTV.
There's. How does she know about the CCTV?
There's a big fuck off camera. Sorry, excuse me. I mean, I don't know.
But like
maybe
says,
poetic realism.
But why would she want to name? I want forever this moment where I had to leave her on a pavement on a church step to be her defining moment, to the point where it's her name. Maybe write a note going, I want to call her Mariam because that was my mum's name.
Good job she wasn't left in. Good job she wasn't left in Pudding Lane, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh,
no, it
felt Dr. Lamb.
like
Hello, I'm the doctor. What's your name? Pudding. Oh, bye then.
Well, it's better than Brindle, but so yeah, I mean, I did like a lot of this, but most of it was to do with the build-up from the week before, and I thought the first third of it was the sort of 9/11 stuff, with the first wave of I bring you the dust of Sutekh, the dust of death, was really effective and really thrilling. And then when they killed Kate, I thought, oh my God, they've killed Kate. Oh no, they've killed everybody. Oh, it's going to be a reset button. And so from that point on, I wasn't interested because I saw in my head the scene we saw with everyone waking up and shaking off the dust. I literally saw it in my head. And, and my 8-year-old went, well, they're not dead, are they? He was thrilled for 30 seconds when Kate was killed, and then he wasn't.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because
they're all alive.
There's a limit to how many people you can kill. You kill Osgood, and only Osgood, and that's got weight because you think, well, it probably won't come back. But you kill Kate, and you think, oh, that's got impact. That's oh, they've killed Mel and Ruby's mother. Okay, Russell T Davies wouldn't start killing multiple main characters in your story without bringing back. So then suddenly it becomes predictable.
Yeah,
I think. Go on, John.
For me, it's that I'm fine with that as long as it's got some emotional weight or heft or consequence somewhere down the line. And the problem to me was by the end of it, no one had any emotional consequence or heft to it. It wasn't even Ruby can never find out who her mother is because she couldn't tell Sutek. There was no reason afterwards to care.
Like I said, everything that Russell T Davies basically had said through the characters or through the stories, through the fiction, through the plotting, that was going to sort of unravel in this final episode just didn't even turn up.
It reminded me of the Thanos click in MCU where you kind of thought maybe they're going to reset that, but then they didn't, and they had real world consequences which they're still playing out in the MCU because they had the 5-year gap. Even though there was going to be a reset and they were going to bring people back that you thought were dead, they also killed a lot of people doing that. And this was like, and Doctor Who's done this reset so many times as well.
I think the problem here stems back. I mean, it goes back to as soon as Kate gets killed, you kind of know. But I think the trailers that they showed kind of tipped you off that it had to be a reset of some kind. I think resets are fine as long as you do it in a clever way. As long as you find a reason. So I think people hate the reset at the end of Journey to the Centre of the TARDIS. But I don't mind that one so much because it kind of shows that there's been an impact on the 3 guest characters at the end of the story. So despite the fact that it seems as if that episode has been unlived, they still come out of it with consequences. If you come out of a reset, like John says, without consequences, that's to the Time Lords. At least everybody who was in the thing knew and remembered what had happened and experienced all that nastiness from the Master, and they came out of it with psychological scars. In this one, it was even worse than at the end of Power of 3 when everybody wakes up from their heart attacks. At this one, everybody just stands up and gets on with it.
Yeah, no, it's weird to say where there's a line, isn't there? But the one with Martha and we're all at the centre of this, so we'll remember. And then they have that brilliant coda with the woman who had turned bad. And then Martha just saying, I forgive you. Stuff like that. It's just, in this one, it was so pat and so quick and so obviously going to happen. And they didn't even have the Doctor going, well, I'm going to undo this. Or, there was no cost to it at all. It was just literally, I pressed the right button. I did the thing. There's no cost. Unless that cost was, this time I'm going to be bothered that I killed somebody, even though at the end of the Flux, which was quite similar to this, I committed 3 genocides at once. But
but that was, well, no, she actually, this often comes up. She doesn't commit the genocides. She allows the Daleks, Cybermen, and Sontarans to wipe themselves
maybe out. But having the Doctor being fussy about killing people is never quite stands up to any scrutiny whatsoever, because he's a warrior who kills loads of people.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to go back to something Russell T Davies said, and I wish I could remember where it was that he said this, because then I could get the actual quote. And I think I brought this up last week. And Davies said something in the Radio Times or somewhere, and I don't think most people have picked up on this, because it wasn't specific. It was a very general sort of comment, so it was hard to sort of pin it down. But he said something along the lines of, I'm trying to do storytelling this time. And then it was a different kind of storytelling. And the kind of impression he gave was that he was taking some of the sort of world building or the character building or the plot building out of the storytelling. And he was trying to tell stories that were more about how you feel about what you see rather than about the the sort of specifics, the logistics, the mechanics of what you see. But I think so. Last week, it felt like he was setting a bunch of stuff up. It was like he was drawing definite lines in the sand, and all these lines in the sand looked like they were pointing somewhere. But this week, it felt to me like he's come along and said, look at all these lines in the sand, but wouldn't it be so much better if they're all just a bit faint and smudgy? And so instead of finishing the lines off and bringing them together so the lines all join up at the end, instead he's just smudged over them with a brush or something so that you can't see the lines anymore. And it's like, that is certainly a choice. But when the stories that you're trying to tell, as opposed to be for sort of audiences across the sort of demographic divide, you can't do it like that. You can't be as vague as that. So I want to. So Iain, US Iain, the one that you've not been enjoying it, does that sound? And you're somebody who does podcasts about books, so you know about plotting and you know about character. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound like the experience of this series? That Russell T Davies has kind of been doing it in a much more vague way.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think the writing was on the wall for this story right at the start of part one, where after 6 episodes of randomly encountering Susan Twist's face, and expressly telling Ruby, we can't go back and find out about your mum, he just rocks up at unit and says, right, there's this woman's face I keep seeing, and we need to find out who her mum is. And that came out of nowhere. And that is very much, we're here for the story. We're not here for the reasons why, or the, the careful narrative work to get us here. And you're just left going, well, but that doesn't follow on from what we've been watching. It feels like this was written in a hurry at 3 a.m. with not even with a hangover yet, still quite pissed.
I have this thing as well. Moffat always made the Doctor the cleverest person there. And I think even Chibnall made the Doctor the cleverest person there. But Russell T Davies this time, so Russell T Davies made his Tenant Doctor the most know-it-all person there. But it feels like the Ncuti Gatwa Doctor is the least clever person in the room a lot of the time. And that's a perfect example of it. He rocks up. Everybody else in that room knows exactly who this woman is. And the Doctor, who's got the most powerful time machine that we've ever seen, can't figure it out for himself.
I like that bit. That's the one bit where the Doctor felt like the Doctor for me. That he's come in with this grand sort of plan,
yes, I meant
and everybody else knows more than the Doctor. That's the Doctor issue. I heard that they'd cut a scene, or there was a scene missing, like pre-titles, which had a different Susan Twist in it, which would have made that slightly less jarring. I didn't mind it because it got you from one place to the next very, very quickly.
And it got everybody back in. I did notice, actually, as I was watching that, I did think of you, Matt, because you said you'd not had the moment where the Doctor gets his pomposity punctured, for want of a better, and that was exactly that scene, wasn't it? Pretty much.
Yeah, I like that bit.
Right, let's talk about cultural appropriation. I know you've got thoughts on this, Iain. I've got thoughts too, but I'll give you the floor.
I've got thoughts as well.
Have you? Okay, let's talk about cultural appropriation.
I just thought it was such an unnecessary line, especially because the culture being appropriated is a dead culture. It's ancient Egypt. So the dodgy side of Pyramids of Mars is the colonial aspect, which is we're going to, we're going to modern day Egypt or 1911 Egypt, and we're doing things, and that's kind of very King Solomon's mind, so you can kind of forgive it, much like you can forgive Talons of Weng Chiang, because it's Fu Manchu, not rather than real. But ancient Egyptian gods, it's a chariots of the gods thing. It's not, there's no one who's really worships the Egyptian gods anymore. So what is this a cultural appropriation that he's referring to? Why couldn't they have Ankhs and things and ancient Egypt being part of Sutek's thing?
I thought it was a first of all, it was a joke, sort of a slightly like off the cuff comment. But also what interested me is I think he's talking about how Sutek adopted the ancient religion, in which case it becomes a kind of a commentary on colonialism rather than. So actually we're in a post-Von Daniken Chariots of God world now. So in
Yeah.
the 1970s, aliens are the gods. Now gods are the gods, but actually gods are sort of leeching on, or gods stroke religion are leeching on the cultures of other communities to kind of gain power, which is kind of what Christianity did in this country. It sort of pretended to be pagan in order to get the locals on side. And it's sort of saying that that's what Sutekh does. That's why Sutekh looks like an Egyptian god, because there was an expectation of Egyptian gods in ancient Egypt, and he kind of, you know, piggybacked on it when he was a man.
But it's made explicit in Pyramids of Mars. So remind me if this bit was cut out of the shorter version, because I don't recall. It's made explicit in Pyramids of Mars that the ancient Egyptians are basing their iconography on the Osirians.
Yes, but I think this has gone beyond that. So this isn't saying that. This is saying that Sutekh bases his appearance on Egyptian iconography. So it kind of flips that. And I find that quite interesting. Whether or not, you know, it's good Sutekh lore, I don't know. But I find it quite interesting because we're not in the 1970s anymore. We're post Von Daniken.
But in what way is it funny is kind of what I'm pushing at.
Because, well, in a sort of an ironic way. I think he just says, oh, cultural appropriation, you know. I mean, and he does a lot, because that set me on the chain of thought that went from Von Daniken to now. I thought it was quite a clever thing. It turns it into a colonial commentary, basically.
But obviously Russell T Davies wants to have his cake and eat it, because he's still got Sutekh dressed as a Egyptian god.
Yeah, but that makes him villainous. That's the point. He's a colonist. That's, you know, that's kind of, it's not, you know, it's not about.
I don't think he draws the lines though, does he? Because you say he's a colonist, but he's not. He destroys things, doesn't he? It's I failed to find. So in almost all of the episodes this year, the stories have been about something that's sort of reflects our world. But in this one, he just tosses off the expression cultural appropriation.
Yeah.
But I don't think he draws the lines and makes the episode about anything.
I agree with you, JR. I think it just felt like a tossed off line, and I would have actually liked a little bit of actually, you know, pick a side. Oh, he used to appear a lot more like an Egyptian god, or the Egyptians, you know, based their religion on Sutekh, or something that would just have. But just to say cultural appropriation just made it seem a bit silly. I was a bit embarrassed because it was, you know, there's just no need. There was just no need for it, really. He's called Sutekh. He's an Egyptian. He was an Egyptian god, and in Pyramids of Mars, that's where he latched on Earth in a Van Daniken kind of way. But
he had an opportunity to see. This is where I found this episode really disappointing. He had lots of opportunities, Davis, to dig into things and to find substance, and it didn't feel to me like he dug into anything and found any substance anywhere. The whole Ruby Sunday thing at the end, for example, goes on and on and on for ages to make a single point that Last Jedi made in a sentence. And in The Last Jedi, it's really powerful because it's made in a sentence and you get to see the impact of it. Russell T Davies takes 15 minutes, and every second of that 15 minutes, the impact dissipates and the meaning dissipates.
I think he spends 15 minutes showing the effects of that revelation.
Well, I don't think you saw the effect,
which isn't very interesting in a sort of dramatic sci-fi way, but in a kind of a soap opera way. That the reuniting of Ruby with her mother, the revelation about where she gets her name from, and that leads up to her decision not to travel with the Doctor. She's suddenly rediscovering this kind of new family, and I think
but she wants to carry on, doesn't she? He's the one who says to her, "You can't travel with me anymore." Tell you what,
she's saying it to him basically by being on the phone and sort of saying, "Well, maybe I could." I don't want to go necessarily anywhere. I want to go and see my father now and my mother. Where do you want to go, Ruby? Well, you decide. I'm going to go. So she's saying it, but she's saying it without saying it.
Is that mirroring, though, the Doctor having to sort himself out in the giggle, you know, the Tennant Doctor? He's going, right, you sort yourself out, and maybe I'll come back. And that might explain that she's going to be back next year.
Yeah. Didn't feel like it. I tell you what, though, I found really risible about that last sort of 15 minutes and why I don't think he's dealing with the impact. Throughout this whole thing, Ruby's mother is her adoptive mother, and we never, and throughout the last 15 minutes, throughout that entire episode, throughout both episodes, Ruby's mother's there, and Ruby's got this whole thing, I'm going to find out who my real mum is, and we never at any point understand anything about how Ruby's adoptive mother, her mother feels about this. She just gives a sort of light encouragement in a really non-committal way, and there's no impact seen on her at all.
But I think that's probably
is, yeah.
fairly realistic.
Where they're all having a hug.
Yeah, that's fairly realistic.
That's not an impact, though,
because Ruby's mother has fostered lots of children. So I think the reality.
This is the one she kept, though.
Yeah, but the reality
this is more important.
The reality is, I think if you foster a lot of children, even adopting some, there's an expectation that at some point, you know, a relationship with the real parents or a desire to know the real parents, that's always been an assumption. This is dealing with the reality of adoption. And yeah,
but that would have emotional consequences.
Well, not if you've basically spent the last 20 years or however long living with that expectation, and you're used to that kind of relationship.
Oh no, I think you're way off. I think this
well,
would
that's
have
what
massive
that's what Ruby's
consequences.
mother is. I mean, Ruby's mother's embracing this idea of finding the real mother and forging a relationship with her.
I think the terminology is poor as well, because real mother as opposed to birth mother. Well, real mother is like, oh, hang on, what have I been doing for the past 20 years?
Birth mother, then. I think real mother was my expression.
Yeah, I think that's the one the show uses, to be honest.
Yeah, but I think it's real.
Yeah,
I think
it
it's
did.
kind of,
and actually, Davis got into a lot of trouble for that.
I think it's potentially quite, emotionally real. Because I
didn't feel any emotion.
Well, no, because I think the soap opera dramatic kind of cliched way would be the adopted parents would be really upset with Ruby's desire to find her birth mother and would feel really awkward about it. But actually, the way it's presented here says something about Ruby's mother and the history of Ruby's mother, which is Ruby's mother has fostered a lot of children. She's had a lot of sort of temporary relationships with children. She's adopted a child, but with this expectation that at some point the child, Ruby, will want to find a birth mother. And I think there's this kind of idea that she might be all right with it. She might be supportive with it because she loves Ruby. That's what parents do, isn't it? They want to support their children and what they want to do. And Ruby, I mean, come on.
But we need to see her making that decision. We need to see her feeling those emotions.
They kept this VHS and they've studied it to try and find out who the birth mother is. So if Ruby's adopted mother isn't going to be anything other than happy and supportive that they found a birth mother, then that would be weird.
Then at least have a conversation about it. There's nothing at all.
You don't need a conversation because you can see that she's supportive because there's a group hug at the end. That's the shortcut to it.
I mean, it's a shortcut. It's a shortcut.
Dramas like this don't need to tell you everything. They have to have shortcuts.
If you're going to put characters in and make it about the characters, then you need to see the character of those characters.
Yes. So you've seen the relationship between Ruby and her adopted mother. You've seen the little box that they keep under the thing, which is the sort of hunt for the adopted mother. You've seen the adopted mother involved in the hunt for the real mother at unit. So this has been seeded. I think this has been things.
And every Christmas they watch the video.
Yeah. This is one of the smarter things that Russell T Davies has done, that he doesn't go for the cliche, which would work against what we've seen in the past,
But he doesn't go for the cliche, but he doesn't go for anything else instead. He just ignores it altogether.
Well, no, because as John says, you see them together at the end. They're happy. There's no drama.
There is no drama.
There's no drama in this relationship between adopted mother and birth mother.
Yeah.
That's the point. The lack of tension there is the point.
I think you're both right in the I think because what happens at the end, there's no drama, but that's fine. But that's exactly why you could just cut that bit off, because it's implied that they're going to get on and everything's fine without 10 minutes of showing everything's fine. I think you could probably have had.
So that's,
you know,
that would be
her going, the bit in the coffee shop would probably be fine, and then cut to the TARDIS, maybe.
That is my criticism, as it always is with Russell T Davies, is he spends too long with it, because he's almost indulgently in love with his own characters. That's you know.
And
then
then
you think with Team America, you could have got away with a montage.
Yeah, well, but then we've got 10 minutes of, you know, as my kids were saying, oh my God, so they're just happen, you know, we've not even talked about the bungee rope and the taking the dog for a walk bit. I mean, I think, to get back to another problem I had with this, was I think he wrote himself into a corner, not necessarily at the end of last episode, because Sutek coming back, that's fine, but when he basically went, Sutek has now destroyed all life in the universe, that's a bit big to then be sorted out half an hour later, for my money, for my tastes. That I really liked it when it was like, oh my God, look at central London, there's something happening. I thought they were going to contain it, and the struggle would be stopping Sutek destroying the universe. And there's some, you know, and then it would, I was really with it when they were escaping on the moped and stuff was happening with the dust, and it was a localized massive disaster, which maybe the Doctor could have done something with some technology, and we've got to do something, we've got to race against the clock, and Sutek needs to be sorted out before he does this crazy thing. But they went full flux with it. And then everyone's dead. Oh, apart from some people aren't. Actually, we've missed some scenes out. It was a bit like in Flux, where suddenly there's people waiting for people, and it's like, I thought Flux had killed everybody. Have they been explained?
Podcast.
Yeah,
I agree with the scale thing, because you can only destroy the universe. Well, you can't keep destroying the universe without it sort of. But that's Doctor Who. What I did like was this idea of the TARDIS and Susan Twist being a kind of a pandemic super spreader through time. I like that idea of the way it explained how all these time zones, everywhere the Doctor's been, he's somehow left.
Yeah, but he hasn't been everywhere.
Twist. No, but
he hasn't lived a billion years. He's lived a few thousand.
But like that line said, effectively he's been everywhere. I mean, it's like, you know, obviously hasn't been everywhere, but there's like, you know, where the TARDIS has been, everywhere the TARDIS has been, he's left this kind of infection of Sutek. And actually, he doesn't need to have been everywhere, because, you know, this is happening at the beginning of time, and you can see it starting to affect time. So the scene of the memory, the nice woman on the other planet, I kind of like that as well, because it was a quiet scene and she's slowly losing her memory, and it gives you the demonstration of how this kind of, how Sutek's effect isn't just a kind of 1990s mummy dust cloud going through a city. It's actually destroying memories as well. And there's a big thing about the power of memories. It's Ruby's memories, it's the memory TARDIS, it's this woman's memories being destroyed. It's, you know, Mel's memories making her vulnerable.
What they really just needed was to show a flashback to Terminus, and to show Susan Twist on Terminus at the start of the universe, and we'd have been all sorted.
Yeah, but this is a you know, more fun way of doing that.
It was fine. I mean, and also we got to see bits of Pyramids of Mars, right? Twice, in fact.
Yeah.
And Caroline Ford.
Yeah, in colour.
Yeah, they're going to have to bring her back quick if she's coming back.
She's definitely coming back. It's all set up, isn't it? If it's not
but I
Christmas,
thought
then
loads
it's going
of
to
things
be.
were set up and they weren't.
Well, that is true. I mean, he was playing with us. I think the main problem with this is he took big swings with narrative and expectations. It reminded me of, have you seen Adaptation, the Nick Cage film? And that, for me, was like, oh, this is really clever. This is really clever. The third act, I switched off, because it's all made up and has no consequence. And this was a bit, okay, I don't know what I wanted, but her being ordinary and then being ordinary for ages, it was playing with our expectations, and it was a bit like the reaction to Jed Mercurio's Line of Duty at the end. Everyone went, "You set this up as a cop drama with cop drama things going on. This isn't. And the audience went mad because it wasn't he played with the conventions and got burned.
It's kind of a paradox, isn't it? With fan,
Yeah.
so fan discussions. There's a kind of a teasing about fan discussions where it always goes back to the Rani, or it's always a returning character coming back, or it's always Susan. And there's a kind of, obviously Russell T Davies knows this, but obviously that's what fan discussions are going to be, because fan discussions are never going to be, well, it's going to be a completely new character, because that's not the start of a conversation. If the big bad in this, if it was Tim Shaw in Chibnall's times, there's no conversation to be had about Tim Shaw, because it's going to be a new character, right? If it's it's going to be the Rani because we know this about the Rani and that about the Rani. So it's always fan discussions are always going to be about returning characters, about things from the Doctor Who past, not because fans are obsessed with that or they actually necessarily believe that's going to happen all the time. It's just that's what discussions are. That's the only way of inspiring discussions. And Mavity didn't come back. There we go. And it wasn't the Beast from the Impossible Planet, as it turns out.
It wasn't anything.
That would have made more sense if it had been the Beast, to be honest, because Sutek to most people watching this was exactly what you just described. All these clues, all these, who's it going to be? Oh, somebody I've never heard of. That's what it was to most people watching. It was a monster whose name you didn't know till he was revealed.
And there was nothing to tie it to Pyramids of Mars except the fact that Sutek ends up in a vortex and happily lives there at the end of Pyramids of Mars.
The Beast would have at least gone, oh, this is a throwback to a show you might have seen, because it was a David Tennant episode.
I don't buy that Sutek doesn't mean anything because it's from 1975. It's all about how he's presented at that point. So if he's presented as the Doctor says, as he does something like, like somebody I battled many, many years ago, I think that's exciting for not just for long-term fans. Surely that's exciting for kids because they can see that there's something from the Doctor's far past. And there are little clips which, that's quite exciting, because that's what excited me in the 1980s, even when they didn't do it very much. It's just sort of little flashbacks to the show's past that sort of says something deeper is happening. I think the Beast isn't a character to bring back. The Beast is an archetype. It's not a character. It's just
sorry.
Well, I was only going to say, but the point is, Sutek doesn't do anything in this story either. He spreads the sand. That's it. He spreads the sand. But there's no reason why he should want to spread the sand. There's nothing he achieves by spreading the sand. He doesn't actually do anything himself that causes the spreading of the sand. In fact, as a character, in the first Pyramids of Mars, he sits in one spot, and there's a reason in the story why he sits in one spot. In this episode, he sits in one spot, and there's no reason whatsoever why he should do that.
Yeah, I find Sutek, in fact, I wrote this in my notes, he is the threat of, if you had a threat of a nuclear holocaust in a movie, you stop the nuclear holocaust, maybe some bombs go off, but ultimately you stop the nuclear holocaust. What they did was the threat of Sutek then came to pass, and that was a bold move, but I think ultimately...
You've got to do something with it. Once that's out.
Destroying everything and then going, oh God, I've only got 40 minutes to undo this. How the hell am I going to sell this to people? And I don't think, I think he should have gone back and gone, actually, I've gone down that avenue. 40 minutes isn't long enough to sell this. Maybe the bold thing to do would be end the season with everything destroyed.
Do you know what's brilliant
then we'd have gone, fuck me, that's good.
Do you know what's brilliant about Utopia? Do you know what's brilliant about Utopia is that you spend that whole episode introducing the concept of the Master, and then have a two-part story where you can lean into the substance of that character afterwards. This one spends 45 minutes introducing the concept of Sutek, and then puts the concept of Sutek up on screen, doesn't do anything with it, and then 20 minutes later ties a great big leash around his neck and drags him off to the time vortex, where he lived out a natural lifespan at the end of Pyramids of Mars. At the end of Pyramids of Mars, Sutek lives in the vortex for his natural time span until he dies at the end of it. That's how that story ends.
Except in Russell T Davies' head in 1975. He says this on the InVision commentary. He said, nope, made perfect sense to me that he just latch onto the TARDIS because they just bugger us off straight afterwards.
It kind of, I didn't expect that
The
to
TARDIS
happen.
isn't in the vortex though.
I didn't expect that to happen, but JR convinced me that that would happen because they use a piece of machinery from the TARDIS. That was JR's idea last week that I wasn't convinced about. But as soon as Russell T Davies does it, it's like, oh no, he was in the time vortex. We can see it.
No, but the point is, Matt, not that whether he's in the time vortex or not, but that having told a story about a character who, whether he goes into the TARDIS or not, lives through the time vortex before that happens, however long it is. The point being, I don't think the way they get rid of Sutek at the end of this story has enough substance. I think what happened is Russell T Davies said, what if we brought Sutek back and made him a god, a big giant dog? How would you get rid of the big giant dog? With a big giant leash. And he chortled and chortled and chortled. And nobody at Bad Wolf, and nobody at BBC Studios, and nobody at the BBC, and nobody at Disney said to Russell T Davies, you can't fucking do that, mate.
I liked it. I like that bit.
He can. It's obvious he can.
Yeah, I like that bit.
I think it's
honestly,
fun, but I don't think it's a worthwhile.
I mean, it's a matter of taste, and I'm with you, JR. I thought it was cheap, especially when you've got such an amazing episode that it's a sequel to. And then you have a cheap. It's a bungee rope.
It's a mid-series solution and a fun story. It's not how you end your story arc.
I think it's saved by that line that by killing the god of death, you bring life. That's what the Doctor said.
Yeah, bring death to death. It's two negatives make a positive.
No, it just makes more death.
Yeah, it just makes. Yeah. It's not
extra death. There's too many moments in this that fridge logic, as they say, that you just go in. For me, there's too many things to pick holes in for me to really. I didn't mind this episode, but it's never going to be one of my favourites. And one of the, I really am adverse to things being revealed to have always been there, because I'm there going, so every time I look at the moon in a Doctor Who episode, there's a fucking dragon growing inside it. Every time I'm on Earth, the Silents are hanging around. Every time the TARDIS, ever since Pyramids of Mars, Sutek's been in there.
And how many times has the TARDIS been completely destroyed in the last 50 years?
Yeah. I'm really averse to that kind of thing. It cheapens everything. But that maybe we think too much.
I think we're looking at fans. Yeah. That's the thing. We're looking at fans. It's not the important story to Russell T isn't the Sutek one, because it's just me to get where he wants to go. It's the Ruby Sunday one, and it's the same thing Taylor Swift does in pop. It's this, I don't want to say universalizing, but he has this thing about teenage girls. He captures it quite well of how all important things are in the world, how big the emotions are. You haven't got the experience to deal with it. So this is Ruby Sunday's story told via apocalyptic event. But it's character stuff. It's soap opera stuff. Go on, man.
And the important thing isn't the dog leash. It's that moment where Ruby Sunday has, potentially the answer, or she's pretending to have the answer, or we don't know if she has the answer on the screen as to who her mother is. And Sutek doesn't know because of the 73-yard thing and the perception filter. And this is tempting Sutek. And then Ruby smashes the screen.
Yeah,
which feels like a sacrifice.
That's an element.
Is like
but it's not a sacrifice, as we find out. But I didn't mind that, because I think that tied into what we were saying with Dot and Bubble, is people with the Achilles heel of Sutek is he wants to kill everybody and he wants to know everything. And so they can use Ruby's mother as a trap. Although presumably he knows full well she's dead because she's on Earth.
Yeah, but, it's why does Sutek care?
He just doesn't know her identity.
I don't think I was never told by Russell T Davies on why does Sutek care. And going back to your point about Sutek's always been in the TARDIS, actually I don't mind stuff like that as long as the writer thinks it through enough to sort of convey the logistics. So, for example, why now? So in The Silence, in the Stephen Moffat two-parter,
The Impossible Astronaut.
Once the Doctor works out what's going on, that's when he goes to the place to sort the thing out. So it's about the Doctor discovering what's happening and going to it. But in this, it's just like, oh, okay, I've been here on the back of the TARDIS for 49 years, and yeah, okay, I'll hop off now and do the thing now. It's like,
it's very arbitrary.
What is the thing?
Remember, there's a line in
into
Rose,
motion?
his constant companion is death.
Yeah, 15, 16, 19 years ago. Why is that an important thing
Playing
now?
the long game.
Yeah, but why now? It's the long
Yeah,
game.
we,
But
we,
why
we
now?
needed to see what animated him right
What
now.
sets this story into motion?
You know,
Yeah.
maybe it was, if you cast your mind back 8 episodes to when the Doctor magically made another
gonna
TARDIS
answer
by
the door.
hitting it with a hammer, then maybe,
Oh, thank God.
you know, Sutek jumped onto Shooty's TARDIS, and that gave him the magical power to manifest.
So surely the right now
yeah, but-
explanation, whilst JR's away, isn't that Wild Blue Yonder? So that's how Wild Blue Yonder connects. The Doctor's brought back all of this pantheon of gods.
There is that, but it hasn't been I don't know, I'm bothered it hasn't been properly explained and I don't mean being spoon-fed to me, but it hasn't been properly communicated by the writer that this is what happened. Him doing something with Salt at the end of the universe. I thought if we picked him up at the end of the universe, that would explain why now. But
that was my preference.
Turned out, then it turned out, because that's when the groan started in Wild Blue Yonder.
Yeah,
that's what I thought maybe had happened. But
coffee that Donna Donna Noble spills on the console, is that what wakes him up?
Oh, that would be more exciting than the pantheon of gods at the end of time.
But
I agree.
But none of that's been explained.
So there was one missing piece of information, which is
just the one
what connected Sutek with the pantheon of gods coming back. So what awakened Sutek, which I guess as fans you just have to fill in that suddenly the pantheon of gods are back to act as his harbingers, basically.
Yeah, the Doctor's changed the rules of the universe.
Yeah,
unless this is another big red herring, and actually all this is to do with Mrs. Flood rather than Sutek, and Sutek just happens to have coincidentally turned up at the same time. Because Mrs. Flood at the end, she's the White Guardian, right?
No, Master of the Land of Fiction, Mistress.
Oh, Romana.
No, Master of the Land of Fiction is just a human being who's been installed in a computer. No, it's Russell T Davies. What am I talking about?
But she is less powerful than Sutek because she gets killed.
Yeah, she's the master.
Oh yeah, I was being silly. I was talking about the costume she's wearing at the end. I thought she was going to pull the hood down and there'd be a dove on her head or something.
Yeah. No, I think she's probably the master.
I think now she's probably. I think she's now probably malevolent. I thought she might be a force for good, disguised last episode, but I think now she's the malevolence for next season.
She was good fun though.
She didn't recognise the TARDIS. She didn't recognise the police box as a TARDIS. She only knew what the TARDIS was when she heard the sound. But again, Russell T Davies.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a real problem, isn't it, when the writer doesn't even make the logic of his own stories add up.
I think the problem we've all got now is that we're so used to looking for hidden meanings and secret callbacks and 50-year-old things that can come back, and we've got these very complex ways of looking at the show. And I think now we all know it's never going to add up to a hill of beans. So,
but I don't even think in those terms. I just think in terms of to somebody watching this show who just knows basic Doctor Who, it doesn't do here's a clue, here's a setup, here's a payoff, here's the narrative device of heavily hinting. Like he did that in 73 Yards, the perception field thing. Oh, that's enough to explain it. But then there are other things like, why is everyone scared of Ruby, the old Ruby? No, there's never an explanation. And then it's because it's about vibes and it's Sapphire and Steel, not Doctor Who. And then for my taste, there's too many of those things that aren't to do with because I'm a Doctor Who fan who knows 60 years of lore, just in terms of basic storytelling. Yeah, I'm bothered that these things, like you said, the lines aren't being drawn between things.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the worst.
So that's why I'm not massively into this season.
I think he actually descended to cheating as far as one point with that whole overall arc thing, though. With Ruby Sunday, at the start we're told, oh, her DNA is nowhere to be found. Then, oh, her mum's a nurse. You go, really? Come on.
Yeah,
Well, no, that's fair enough, because I don't think my DNA is on file. So I think they're saying that that's why they
That's quite hubristic. That's a very hubristic statement for someone with your internet search history, Matthew.
That's why they talk about the 2040s, and the one of the weaker bits was tying it to the Welsh politician guy who wants universal, everybody's DNA stored. And that's the point of that. And my problem was, I thought, he didn't have much of a character in 73 Yards. I wondered if he'll be brought back for this episode. He was brought back for this episode, but not from very much, not very much other than to get them to 2046.
but yeah, I think the Ruby Sunday DNA thing is just another example of Russell T Davies just putting shed loads of things in front of us, and like none of them have any import really.
Well, I think that's unfair. I think it's unfair that there are a few things that don't have import. There are a few connections he hasn't made. But actually,
I can't think of anything that did have import.
I've watched this season, and it's kind of clicked together quite neatly to me. I watched this episode, and it was full of themes and incidents that I found quite interesting and depths. And I think he did make the connections. I think there were just some places that it didn't. Moffat had exactly the same thing.
But that's why I've never been a fan of most of Moffat's seasons.
But JR is.
They were plates spinning and plates falling down for me.
So why is this guy allowed on our show? What?
Isn't there a line about that the only thing it don't matter because we say they do? Was there a line about that?
Yeah. It's like we imbue people or things, but we imbue people specifically with importance, and that's what makes them important. But then you've got to look at Russell T Davies and say, oh, so Ruby's mother was the only important person because Ruby's the only person who can imbue somebody with importance, and everybody else is just dead because nobody else bothered to love their parents.
This is why I said Heaven Sent. Yeah, because he's trying to do the same thing Moffat did with Heaven Sent, with the hybrid stuff. It doesn't really matter.
But I think the hybrid stuff is answered. That's kind of the point.
Well, it is.
But I just don't think that Russell T Davies answers the things that he sets up. I just don't. I
think it's a problem because his writing background is soap, so that is all built around the cliffhangers, the ongoing stories. It's not built about endings. It goes on forever. Same thing. He's in love with Doctor Who. He loves comics, stories that go on forever. So where he has trouble satisfying an ending like that because it doesn't come naturally, I don't think.
I think the other problem is in soaps you can tell lots of stories, but you're telling lots of stories about lots of characters. If you're telling lots of stories about the same two characters, then that suddenly becomes a problem because each of these characters has got about 6 stories going on that you have to answer. You can't not answer them in a series that's only about 2 ongoing characters. You have to bring them in. And so Russell T Davies won. See, this is why I'm bringing up the thing about Russell T Davies saying I'm trying to tell stories in a different way here. Because in Russell T Davies 1, I think mostly he does bring the plots home, the things that he's been telling. I think mostly he does. But here it just... So you've got the bit at the end of Doomsday where the Doctor and Rose are divided by universes, and so you get this big dramatic scene that they're divided by universes. It felt like he was trying to replicate that here, but they're divided by the Doctor just doesn't have the patience to wait for it. It felt like an entirely different order of resolving characters.
Yeah, I much prefer Russell T Davies over Moffat on nearly every level. And
you're right, Iain. Let's get rid of him.
Yeah, but this felt to me more like a Moffat-y era. It reminded me of the worst things of Moffat and the worst things of RTD. We're still liking lots of it, but it reminded me of a Moffat second parter. It reminded me of the sort of worst kind of excesses of Russell T Davies's finales. So, you know, generally, for me, it wasn't the best of New Who.
The popcorn eating pleasure I have is I know that JR absolutely loves Moffat's finales and the excesses, but JR's agreeing with Iain, but from a completely different angle. And there's this kind of balance, this sort of political balance where JR's going, yes, Iain, yes.
Well,
not really that. Don't talk about Hellbent.
I mean, no, but I think
exactly Hellbent, yeah.
Well, no, Hellbent does tie things up.
There we
That's
go.
kind of the point. But the point is, I think Russell T Davies has tried, and sometimes successfully, to bring in some of what's. I think Russell T Davies has sat and watched Doctor Who for the last, 14 years since he was. So about 14 years. I think he's watched that and he's used that. I think what Russell T Davies has been doing is watching Stephen Moffat and Chris Chibnall and saying, "Oh, that's a really interesting idea. I wonder what I could make of that idea." And other thoughts he's had too, like Pyramids of Mars. He talked about, didn't he? He talked about, I think this was on a thing he did with Stephen Moffat, where he said, what if we just did a sequel to a classic series story and just said, right, here's the classic series story on BBC4, watch this or not, but we're just doing a sequel to it. But I don't think this is a sequel to Pyramids of Mars. I think the trouble is Russell T Davies gets lots of ideas, but then the idea itself is the end of his thought process. I don't think his thought process uses the idea as a starting point, but as a finishing point. And so the trouble is, you'll get great episodes. I think 73 Yards basically is a great episode. It doesn't really resolve, but I don't think it matters so much. But I think it matters when you get to the end of the series. I think you have to make the end of the series resolve. So I think there's been lots of really interesting ideas in this series, and I think overall the episodes have mostly been worthwhile. But I think Russell T Davies has a problem with bringing those ideas home, and this episode in particular has been where he needed to do that to have made it worthwhile, and I just don't think it happened at all. I don't think any of the ideas that he set up he really brought home, and I think the one thing that you can say that he did was that Last Jedi thing, but like I say, that can't be the entire point of it in itself. There has to be more to it than that. It has to have some kind of substance.
I mean, what was Maestro seeing in Ruby when they're putting her up in the air? Oh, you're something special. Is it just because at some point in the future you're going to defeat Sutekh? Maybe go and have a word with Sutekh then, Maestro, if that's what you're sensing.
Why is Sutekh so interested in her? Ruby Sunday cannot be the only human being on a planet of 8 billion people who doesn't know who her birth mother is.
No, I think it's because, to me, I think the way, in structural terms, I think it's the opposite of he always picked up on Susan, and then so he's used Susan as a trap, and so on the other side of things, he's then fascinated by the fact that the Doctor doesn't know who Ruby's mother is. So it's a personal thing to the Doctor. But so then they get to use it as a trap on Sutekh.
Isn't Sutekh just like us fan viewers, basically, that we've become very tied up with not knowing who her mother is, and this perception filter of the TARDIS represents kind of our obsession with bringing things back from the past, and everything has to be significant.
I think that's why it sort of almost works.
Especially
on a second viewing.
It doesn't almost. I think it does work.
Yeah.
But it works by making basically Peter Kay's character from Love and Monsters the big bad of the series. That's essentially what you've boiled Sutekh down to, is Peter Kay in Love and Monsters.
Not really.
If Sutek's the avatar for the fans and he's been watching Doctor Who all this time, should have come back in a good era rather than waiting till now.
I'd like to point out my idea that Sutek's the avatar of the fans. I wasn't including the Absorbalov in that or anything more than just he has a fascination with the identity of Ruby's mother, like we have.
Yes, but why would he? Is my point.
but he's blocked from knowing that because of the TARDIS perception filter, the 73 yards, and so he's got an obsession with knowledge. And
But that's
obviously,
my Peter Kay point. Why is he interested? Sutek. Why does Sutek care? Why would Sutek care? Unless he's the absorber lot.
Does he like to know every single person he's killed personally, and he's bothered that he doesn't know who she is?
He's a god. He's bothered there's something he doesn't know.
So what John's just said makes sense when you watch the episode. It actually is quite an interesting thing about Sutek. JR's reaction is reductive and smacks of an allergy to RTD this year.
I think RTD is the one who's being reductive.
Which is becoming slightly obsessive because now RTD isn't explaining anything. And now nothing makes sense with RTD. Everything RTD says in interviews is a reflection of how he doesn't understand this and this and this. But actually, I think RTD's done quite well in this series. I think there are some loose ends in this episode. I think there are some moments that are elongated beyond what I'm comfortable with. But actually, you know, Sutek's motivation, mostly, I found quite interesting. The whole cultural appropriation thing, I didn't find that awkward. I found that sparked ideas about how gods are cultural appropriators, which is actually saying something more interesting about gods than Von Daniken was. And I say that having, you know, written a book about the demons, still available at Black Archive.
Kept that quiet.
I find these things interesting, and I'm choosing to find these things interesting, and that's elevating the story. If you approach this story thinking, oh my God, Russell T Davies has said this, this, and this in interviews. Oh my God, nothing's making sense. Yeah. That's my problem with the criticism. I agree with some of the criticisms, but I absolutely reject nothing makes sense or all of these things are problems.
I don't know, Matt. You've just said you've chosen to find it interesting.
Well,
it was interesting.
Well, it's Doctor Who. I mean, okay, it's fiction. I choose not to believe any fiction ever. You have to suspend some disbelief in enjoying fiction. Fiction. It's not a documentary.
Quite a lot landed for me. I did like quite a lot of this. I think we're focusing on the negatives, but because we're Doctor Who fans. But I really liked the doubt. Didn't that make you feel alive? That landed for me. And that's like the Sutek's a weird creature because he's just a big bad his motivation is to kill everything. So in a weird way, he's not a very interesting character. But then you add in things like I've done in my own comic, but that make him actually he's like a Nazi, and then who likes to pretend he's only got one thing in life. And Russell's done a similar thing in this, in that he says he's a Nazi who wants to kill everybody, but actually he's a petty little fuck who's bothered that he doesn't know who Ruby's. And I think that does land, and I do think that does work in the episode. And that's one reason I said a second watch made me like this more than on a first watch.
Yeah,
maybe I'm just not the kind of person who feels most alive when they're doubting.
I certainly say that, JR.
Let's face it, as I argue in Rose, the important story is that it's a story of the teenage girl, not the... That's available from Black Archives too.
I just want to point out, me and Iain have published books too.
Yes.
Yeah, the problem is most of the books we've been involved with, JR, aren't available anymore because some of the contributors are now in prison.
Just keep getting arrested.
That's why a monograph is safer.
I'm touching wood.
Yeah.
Yes, Iain just missed out Iain, I've just said that's the winter hill I'm going to die on.
Oh, that's very good. Thank you. Yes. It's not available anymore because I took it off Amazon but yeah.
Amazon is the god of death.
Yes.
Oh, that was the other thing. It's like Russell just got this idea that he was going to bring the gift of at every available opportunity, didn't he? But I just watched Oh Mummy, where they use bring the gift of as a running joke. So it just by the time Russell T Davies had brought it up like the 5th time, I was like, you really should have watched Oh Mummy first, or come up with a different catchphrase. Do your own damn catchphrase. Is there anything else anybody wants to bring up before we give this a score?
I've not even looked at my. We've not mentioned the spoon yet.
You've got notes.
I've got loads of notes, and I'm not even.
Kill him.
But
We don't do notes on this podcast.
I don't remember anything. Well, obviously I do, yeah.
That was another thing. Well,
Sorry,
that was just
Joe.
another thing, wasn't it? There's this woman who's the most important woman in the universe, and it's just because she's the only woman he can find, and she's got a spoon.
It's there apparently to show the impact, because they were looking to cut that at one point, but they found that the script didn't have that kind of weight of the consequences of Sutek's actions without it.
It reminded me of the blue people in the Flux, to show that this was happening everywhere. So they put in some blue people for about 2 seconds.
Yeah.
And it
But
was a
the
bit
point-
like,
And
I liked the individual scene, but as a whole thing, it's like, okay, I felt like there was stuff happening off screen too much. Like, and then when you've got 10 minutes at the end of coffee shop soap opera stuff, and you could have maybe had 10 minutes where you show the impact of the death wave on the universe, more than just one tent with a woman with a spoon, which I did like. She's a brilliant actor. I can't remember her name off.
Sean Clifford.
Yeah, she's the sister on
Fleabag.
On Fleabag. Yeah, brilliant.
But I think the point is, and you could probably explain this away by saying it's not real. But the point is,
Well, that's
you've gone.
say that.
You've
Any
gone,
bad fiction.
No. You didn't let me finish my sentence.
Sorry. Yeah.
You could explain this away by saying the thing I'm about to mention is not real. But they go to the ends of the universe to find a bit of metal because they just need a bit of metal, and it's this spoon they find. But the thing they travel to the ends of the universe in is absolutely rammed full of the biggest amount of shit that you can possibly imagine. Is there nothing in? Is there not a spoon in there somewhere?
It's
got the Seventh Doctor
it would be the
costume. He's
memory
got
of the spoon.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
That's the point. But the point being, John, if it's just the memory of something, how do they travel in? What I mean is the logic. He doesn't make the logic feel real. So that what you're showing on screen is that they're traveling in a sophisticated time ship that's full of stuff. The thing that he's showing us is that they already have access to metal. So he needs to make it more clear, or he needs to show us something else. And just everything about the episode just felt like weird decisions.
On the in-vision commentary, he says that again. Russell T says, "I could have just found a spoon in the TARDIS, but we couldn't. But otherwise, the script
or make it not a spoon, or make it not a spoon.
But it's an unimportant thing. Again,
spoons have a certain amount of weight with Doctor Who.
Ruby's mum is a spoon, is what he's saying basically.
Yeah,
she's an ordinary spoon that saves the
exactly.
universe.
I mean, the Doctor literally saves the day with effectively a teaspoon and an open mind.
Oh, nice! I'm liking that.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, then let's give it a score. Mancune Iain, give it a score out of 10.
I started off thinking this would be a 6 out of 10 when I watched it last night, and then my second watch this morning I got quite positive about it and moved it up to a 7. And you guys have made me go, God, I'm doubting myself. But I'm going to stick at 7 out of 10. But yeah, it's a 7 out of 10. It's a perfectly good episode that I will probably watch again, but it's probably the worst, the least good Russell T Davies finale for me. And
Iain, US.
US
Iain. US Iain, give me a score.
It's a 2 or a 3. I wouldn't watch this again. I'm so glad I didn't go and pay money to watch it in a cinema. Fuck me. Yeah, I'll give it 3.
Okay. John, you go next.
It wasn't quite satisfying, but again, there are those bits that are nicely worded and do land. Like I think the coffee shop scene, for instance, does land, but I don't think the logic of how it gets it makes sense in places. So I'll go with a 6.
Okay. For thought it was the most underwhelming episode of the year, and that even comes after Space Babies. So I'm going with a 4, and Matt.
3 for me. No, I think I'll give it an 8. I liked the return of Sutek. I thought it was interesting. I thought it did interesting things with Sutek. It said interesting things about, as I say, colonization and viruses going back through time. Bonnie Langford was great in it. Bonnie Langford was given quite a lot to do in it, which sort of rescued Bonnie Langford from the Mel years, which is great. I thought it looked great. I loved the fact it was riffing on the 90s mummy movies rather than Hammer and Universal, which made it a little bit more politically acceptable. And as I say, I find that kind of the political idea of ordinary people having the most importance in the universe, I think that's a genuine humanist, socialist kind of message at the end. So, and I thought it held together better than a lot of Russell T Davis's finales.
And on that note, then, we'll be back next week or the week after with our listeners poll, I suppose. And I'll try and get people from the stream who've not been on these podcasts this year to talk about that, so we can get some other opinions too. But until that happens, I was JR.
I was Ian.
I was Ian.
I was John.
I was Matt.
And we will speak again soon.